Welcome to Tenessa Talks. On this episode, we are going to discuss all things budget. So like, subscribe, follow, give us a 5-star review, and enjoy the show.
Oh my goodness, Tenessa. I am looking forward to this week's talk because we're going to talk about the number one thing not only do we talk about in the Bible, which is money, but we're going to talk about government and money.
Yeah.
And it's a hot item. I mean, you hear everywhere, every time you turn on your TV or you pop open Facebook or whatever, you're hearing, do this and cut that. And I feel like programs are being slashed and people are kind of feeling insecure about it all over the United States. So I'm sitting in that today and I want to know more. Help me understand the relationship between government and money and elected officials and money, but maybe we'll start high level and then take me down to where you land as a city council member.
Yeah, down in the trenches.
Yeah.
It is budgets are a big deal. One of the interesting things that has happened over the last, I don't even know, I think during the Obama administration, definitely during the Biden administration, and even I would say probably in Trump's first administration as well, is that we've had just exponential growth in the size of the federal government. And so when you are looking at, which people may or may not look at, like jobs growth, a majority of the jobs growth that's been happening over all those years has really been in the public sector. Like we've just been, if you remember, during Obama's time when they did their stimulus package, it was for shovel-ready projects. And really it just kept increasing and increasing the size of government. And so those job numbers a lot of times were just more public sector jobs being added. And so I know even here in Reading, we've added a lot of jobs since 2020. So there have just been, I would say, an explosion of the size of government. I think the California state, the size of the state has also doubled in size as far as like the budget and the amount of people that we have working. So it's these budgets and these sizes of governments have grown all over the place. And I think it's always good to right size. I think if you continue with the status quo, even though that's comfortable, even though people are accustomed to that, even though people have gotten used to that, that doesn't mean that it's the right decision. And just like even in your own home, you may have made choices based on what was available to you at the time. But when, if you lose a job or your income goes down or maybe you have to stay home and something changes in your income wise, it's probably really smart to reevaluate what you're spending. And so I'm not upset about what's happening at the federal level. I think that there are necessary budget cuts that need to happen. I would argue I would like more budget cuts to happen. And then there is DOGE, where we're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, which is pretty monumental. Like it begins to like not even feel like real numbers as they're talking about, billions of this and billions of that. Like I remember when $1 billion was like a lot of money, but it gets thrown around in government like it's just nothing. But I know our city budget lives and dies by $2 million, So it's like when you get up and in the state, it's, tens and hundreds of millions. And then you get to the federal level. Now we're talking about billions and trillions. And so, the argument like, oh, but DOGE is only cutting $100 billion is like, that's just what have we become? Where are we in life that is not a big deal? So I'm not really upset about what's happening. I just think that this is what tough leadership looks like. The fact is you can't just continue on this course. The size of the labor market is decreasing while the size of the public sector has increased. And it's the labor market that pays for the public sector with your tax dollars. So it's really important that you have more people outside of the government than in the government working. And I know here in California, especially in the north, I would say in almost all the northern counties, the highest employer is the government. And in towns and counties like Sierra, when all of your people that live there majority work for the government, then you don't have people that run stores and have restaurants, and you just don't have that other market balance, if it's just all public sector jobs. And so it's really important that no matter what administration comes in, that they reevaluate and not just keep this status quo.
Mm,
Does
yeah.
that help?
Yeah. No, I think I think immediately I go to, like, you talk about places like Sierra County, for example, and how a majority of the people that live there do have a public job. And I would self-profess, I probably sit more a little bit on the moderate side of the way that view finances and government, and how I get concerned for people. I get concerned for their livelihoods. I get concerned, especially we come in and we start taking away roles, jobs, and I immediately go to, like, how is this going to impact my neighbors, or how is this going to impact Sierra County, whose primary source of income is government? What will that look like? How will it impact them? Those are the things I go to, but I also don't sit in that seat, right? So I think that's where am leaning in to my trusted sources, the people that are in these roles, that are sitting in these budgets, and understanding them to help me get a better idea. And I'm sure that your listeners as well get a better idea of what will happen at the end of this. So you've got these cuts, they're rolling out. Where will we spend our money? What will happen on the tail end of the shoring up of these budgets?
So I think it's really interesting that
When she says
I know
interesting,
you
it
better
always
watch out.
means
Yeah, that's my nice
we
way of
my
yeah. Okay, so it's really interesting to be like, I'm worried about the 5 federal jobs that might be in Sierra County, but I don't think that anybody was as upset and taking to the internet when the mills closed,
Yeah,
and
no,
that's
that's real.
hundreds of
Yeah,
jobs, and that was
that's real.
because of state regulation. So the government is taking away private jobs by over-regulating these markets, and nobody has anything to say about it other than that community who's, obviously that's terrible and devastating for that community, but then you cut 4 government jobs for Sierra County or even 20, I mean, double, triple, whatever. It's like it's still never gonna be the amount that it was for the mills that were there. And this happens over and over again. It's like the public sector, the electeds, they overregulate. It destroys a market. Nobody has anything to say about it, but then a government job is going to go away, and now we're worried about people's livelihoods. It's like they're going to enter the market, which I don't know if you know this or not, but all over in the private sector where, there's jobs that
Yeah,
people don't want. I
right.
mean, honestly, over and over again, we're talking about competing, with the private market in the public market, and you're like, no, I don't want that to be a competition. I want people in the private market. I want people to start businesses. I want people to work in those markets and be successful. If you have a larger government than a private market, or you just have a more expensive government, then at some point it just tips out of balance. And I think that's happened in California, and I think it's happening in the federal government. If the idea is we want to lower taxes, then you have to cut spending.
Yeah.
You can't just lower taxes. That is the argument happening on the right is, okay, well, your big beautiful bill is a spending bill. Where's the cuts?
Mm,
Where's the real meat of cutting things? Yes, you have DOJ recommending these cuts and those cuts and ending, waste and fraud, but where are the cuts to these budgets and right-sizing the government? And so I want those workers to go get into the private world. I want electeds to go live with the laws that they've passed and have, at the state, have those term limits and go see how did you do? Can you fare in this market? I mean, we can see time and time again that when elected officials and when our governor has to be faced with trying to get something done in the face of the regulation of California, i.e. Building,
yeah.
it's like, oh, wow, it's actually really, really difficult given the regulatory climate that you have signed off on over and over and over again. And so you have to determine how big can your government get before it crushes the very people that are paying for it to exist. And we're out of balance. And so do I worry about those people? I don't. I think any change is difficult for human beings or just humans. It is going to be hard to do something different, but then you're going to be okay.
And
And
then
you should have marketable skills.
and elect someone who will go and say, we want to reopen the mills or we want to pursue this in private market to create an economy where livelihoods are flourishing. I actually really
Well, I would
appreciated
say
that.
deregulate. I would say
Deregulate, that's
you're
right.
gonna need to the
Deregulate,
electeds are gonna
deregulate.
need to deregulate. Like,
They
this
have
is
to.
look at what happened.
Yeah.
Newsom, they wanna build. What is the call? What is the actionable thing that they're doing? They're deregulating in order to build. So you wanna rebuild your lot? Okay, well, I have to deregulate
Yeah.
in order to be able to do that. But I thought, we can't deregulate, then, the snow load will crush your It's like, no, because that's not the regulation we're talking about. We're talking about red tape. We're talking about excessive fees and so many different layers that they have added. They've literally added layer upon layer upon layer upon so it's just too much.
I
It's
feel
too
like
hard.
there was one that was floating around here in Reading, the shrimp ferries, fairy shrimp that were in puddles. That I think that was one of them that I just remember
Yeah,
as a kid
it's
growing up
what
and
are
being
we
like, oh, we can't.
protecting? Yeah, what are we protecting? And when we protect puddle shrimp over, you know what I mean?
I think
Over the
yeah.
livelihoods of people, over entire, you know, produce markets and stuff, it's like, what are we doing? We've jumped the shark on this whole regulation thing. Like, we've gone too far.
So what you're saying is we cut and then we also deregulate.
Well, I would love that.
That would be
I would love that.
what we need to elect for.
For the state government. So when I'm talking about the federal government, I think they need to simplify things like something like so imagine the argument of, oh, only the rich people get ahead. And it's like, well, really, it's just anybody that wants to read how the system works, they can get ahead because it's available to everybody. It's not like the rich have a different set of rules than everybody else. The fact is that people that actually play to the rules sometimes win. So it's like you have the same ability to do that.
Yeah.
You can also buy the least expensive house and write off your interest. Like, you can also build wealth that way. Like, there's a lot of different ways to be able to take advantage of the tax breaks and stuff, but also have a flat tax. Like, simplify the entire process. If you want, right now we have progressive taxes. People think we don't. People think that the high earners, pay less. And it's like, no, people that don't have an income pay less. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just like we're just fraught with all of these ideas that are not rooted in reality. And at the end of the day, if we don't cut the size, which means the amount of people that work in government, then our taxes are paying for the salaries of people that aren't doing things that are necessary. And so then that could be going into a college fund for your kids. That could be going into you being able to save up money to buy a house, which is going to help you tax-wise to pay less in taxes. It could help you start that business that you want to, which also protects you from paying too much in taxes because our tax system, for the most part, incentivizes certain things. It incentivizes you to own a home, incentivizes you to have children. I mean, that's what basically laws do. They can either incentivize your behavior or they can de-incentivize your behavior, or they can get the heck out of the way and let the market do what the market will do.
What do you think the government should be spending money on? Like, what would be, and we're talking like big picture right now, and then we'll go into city, but like, what
the
should
good
they
news,
be spending?
Yeah. The good news about that is that, they already talked about this at the founding. So government is instituted to protect people's property. And we basically pay for the things that are good for the whole, right? We're supposed to do your highway system. Everybody would have access so that you have that freedom of assembly and you can freely move about. That's why we're American citizens. We're not California citizens.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's like we are there, federal government is there to do the things that collectively we would not be able to individually do for ourselves, protect our borders, do trade agreements, and those types of things. And then you have your state governments, which are closer to the people, closer to, maybe you do create more laws, but they should be for the good of the whole, right? A speed limit, right?
Who determines good?
No, it's not about determining good. It's about determining the whole.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily, it's just like, should you have one tax that severely penalizes people that own property? Should you have one specific tax, right? And then those get challenged in court.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you're targeting us. You're basically singling us out and saying we should be paying more than everybody else. But we're citizens just like anybody. There's no special thing that we have that allows us to have that. And so that's the you name it. There's arguments that happen that infringe upon that perceived or
Right,
known
I get what
right,
you're
right?
saying,
I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
I remember thinking, well, I've always wanted to go to law school, and I remember thinking like, "Well, then I'll have it all figured out." And then you're like, "No, that's why there's a court and a judge because
Yeah,
everybody's arguing the
right.
same laws, right? It's been the same laws for almost 250 years, and it's like we're still arguing what's true." So, um, again, interpretation and whatnot. So when you're talking about the federal government and what's the whole? When you're talking about the state, it's
Mm.
like, well, what's the whole? Not what's good. It's just sort of like, well, what would be good for the whole? And then when you talk about the city level, it's like, well, what would be good for the whole? And how do you mitigate for if you're going to build a park in one neighborhood that really benefits that neighborhood, is it the city that should be building it? Or do you tell the developer that they have to offer that amenity? You want them to offer that amenity. You give them a discount if they will offer that, in some of their fees because you want to incentivize them to offer that amenity to their, subdivisions or whatnot. You have to figure out how you want to delicately do that balance. But government is force. And so forcing a park to be built, forcing the rest of the taxpayers to pay for that park to be built that is mostly going to be enjoyed by one, I would argue is not good for the whole. Now, is it good for maybe the community and the market? Sure. But then it should be borne by the people that it actually benefits the most. So that's like this interesting balance of, for some, it's like, no, I want to make sure that that happens. But then for some, on the right, because the people need it. That's a left
Mm.
wing. And then the right's like, well, can we afford it? And well, who's best to be paying for that? Maybe it should be those people. But maybe as a city, I incentivize that by giving you some breaks on your fees and, and subsidizing it by the whole because we're giving you less costs on your, plan checks or whatever it is that actually incentivizes you to make that investment into our city.
We're dodging the federal government, but I know that Elon Musk moved out of California. He's not here anymore. I don't know where he is, but somebody's tracking his plane somewhere.
That's right.
But my question is, who's doging? Is there a doge happening? I mean, I feel so silly saying that word, but like, what is happening in California, our state?
Yeah. No, we
Oh,
don't have anybody
that's
doing
good.
that. We're a super majority in California, so I mean, you can talk about it, but not much is going to happen. I would say the closest thing that we've gotten is that Assemblymember Josh Hoover asked for an audit of just the homeless spending. And that has been really eye opening, I think, for everybody to see just how much money has been spent. And then when Newsom then was trying to get answers as to why or where this money went and he couldn't get it, I think it was sort of an eye opener that things aren't being tracked the way they think that they're being tracked, you know? And so that's the closest thing that I've seen, and that was like 2 years ago. So, but there's been changes because of that. So there's a huge value in just reevaluating, are the laws that you've passed, are the budgets you've created, are they actually delivering on what you think that they're delivering? And do we have a rigorous audit process? Because I would say, in my experience, when it comes to the state government, they do a ton of vetting before they ever, and steps and processes, and it takes years to get a grant. Sometimes so many years that by the time you get the grant, because of inflation, you can't even afford to do the project anymore because it's taken so long to go through the process to actually get the
Yeah,
grant.
well, that's
Sometimes it
real.
can take years
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get the grant. So you get the application, and then you run an application process, and then you apply for. I mean, it could take years just to
Mhm,
get the grant.
mhm.
And so I think a lot of times what happens is after that money is granted, there is just very little follow up as to what has happened. Did it get spent the way that you wanted to get spent? How did it get spent? What are all the parameters of that? I feel like that piece of it is very lax. Is It leaves a lot to be desired, and therefore, a lot of times we don't get a ton of good results from a lot of the money that we're spending. And because the idea is, yes, but it's compassionate, and it's kind, and it's good, and we're meeting the needs of people, and of course there's homeless, so we got to keep giving to homeless. It's like you need to have a sober conversation, I think, at times to be like, okay, so we've put $26 billion into this and it's not working. We're growing this sector. So is that a good use of our funds? And if you can't have that honest conversation, I'm not sure why you think you're fit to lead. You know what I mean? Because leadership is not just about being in charge of spending a bunch of money. It should be about spending it wisely.
Mm. Spending money wisely is really important to me. I think there is room for, like, like you said, interpretation of what that looks like, and I would love to see California deregulate. I would love to see renewable resources like mills get brought back. I'd love to see, like you were talking about
Yeah.
last time, like mandating that we use California timber to pay for
Yeah.
our houses. Like that all feels like no-brainers, and I would hope that we could all get on board with something like that. What do you think? How now? Tell me about the relationship between city
Mhm.
and budget.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so before I got into the council, when I hear the term budget workshop, I assume, that you've got your binder out there, your number 2 pencil and your calculator, and you're getting pitched what it is that departments want to happen, and you're parsing through what's what and what can you cut and what can you not cut and what worked last, all those types of things, but none of that has been my experience. I think that's possible, but the rest of the council would have to demand that that's how that process goes. And the council that I was with the first time I did it 2 years ago is not the council that I'm sitting with this time. And so I don't, that didn't happen. It didn't happen the first time. It didn't happen the second time. Largely what happens is you get a little bit of information. It's presented to you as this is what we're doing, and we don't see any other way to do it. You can decide maybe this little thing or that little thing, but you're not given any information or context as to what would make that a good decision or not a good decision. You may see a graph, but you don't have the data. You don't have, percentage year over year for 10 years. You don't have you wouldn't have enough data points to go, oh, I can see the trend is going this way. And oh, here's this Muni Services that recommends this. I can see the report and why there's, I've never seen a report for that. So you really get basically, you know, this is what we think is the best choice, and if you push back on that, we have no alternative. And if it is an alternative, it's catastrophic. And so this is what we think that you should do. And largely, the councils have just said, okay, sure. Because really you're not being given a worksheet that says here's where we were, here's where we're going, here's the actuals for this, and here's the actuals for as this one was even worse than the year before. But or 2 years ago, because at least I had actuals, throughout all of the different staff reports, but we haven't had staff report financial reports to us for almost 2 years. So there really is no way for couldn't even find actuals. So when I did push back on the narrative and on what they were suggesting, there was just no mechanism for me to say, well, because of this number or because of these actuals. I didn't have any of that. And so it was a very difficult process. I've seen what's been happening at the county. They have the departments will come up and the departments will say, this is my budget and this is what I want to do. That's kind of how I imagined budget workshops would go, where they had to argue for what they wanted. And I've been told that it used to be that way. It used to be that in the city of Reading, department heads would come in. This time, a few department heads came in, and when they did not give actuals. And when I asked them for them, they didn't have them. So there's just largely been a lack of transparency at the city of Reading that I didn't anticipate. So it could go back to a better process. It just hasn't been that for the last 2 budget cycles, unfortunately. But the county's doing that, so then it's up to you. So as the elected official, it's up to you how much you want to dig in to figure out what's what. You have access to departments. Now, at the county, those department heads have access to their financials. Ours no longer have that, so I couldn't sit down with one of the departments and go through their budget because they don't have access to all of that information any longer. But the county is able to do that. And I think that's worthwhile because, number one, you learn what's in their budget. You learn what they're responsible for because government's massive. The county's even bigger than us. You know what I mean? And so it's you have all these different departments. They're responsible for all these different things. And the budget is actually a really good way to learn as a locally elected official, to learn sort of what those responsibilities are, what the funding mechanisms are, what the funding sources are, who's responsible for that budget, what happens when you say yes to an appropriation, what happens if you say no to the appropriation, what happens if that department spends that money, doesn't spend, you'll find that out through the budget process if you really dig into it to look through it. So you can do as much and as little as you want. You could just say, I will do what staff recommends. Or you could say, oh, explain this to me. Explain to me why you want to do that. And I think it's better for everybody as far as how do you lead, how do you make decisions, what are you cutting, what are you not cutting, what's the right course, how invested are you in the decisions that have been made based on how much work you'll do on the front side of developing that budget. And so, unfortunately, at the city of Reading, at least in the last 2 budget cycles, that just has not happened. But I think it would be super advantageous for all of those elected officials to really go through like a rigorous workshop process, the way that it used to be done and the way that even the county did it this time.
Yeah. I mean, all of that, I would like that as well. I think
Well,
I mean, who wouldn't?
don't you expect that?
Genuinely, well, I think maybe where I land is, well, yes, I do expect it, number 1. But I'm kind of one of those weird people who nerd out. I watch I mean, you know this.
Yes.
I watch every city city council meeting. I'm online. I watch the county meetings. Like, I am genuinely interested. I'm also curious. Like, I like to see what's happening. I
Yeah.
like to know what's coming. I like to know where our council members' heads are at. I respect all of them up there for the various pieces that they bring to the table. So I think of them as my neighbors and friends. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you guys are to me, are my neighbors and friends and people that are putting their neck out really and get a lot of criticism for the mindsets that you bring to the table. And so, I would love to see the way that you were explaining, the way that the county is doing it. Something along those lines feels exciting to me. I'd love to know what each department head is wanting to do. Not only, I mean, because it's less about like, where do you need to cut? And it's, for me, I sit in the position of, I would like to know where you're headed.
Yeah.
As well as where you've been, what hasn't worked. I don't think of that as a negative. I think of it as, I'm really interested to know what we've tried, what history has said, where we're going, and then what you're dreaming about.
Well, and if you do this process this way, then you're really giving the people the opportunity to hear what's happening in that department, why things are the way they are, and you are creating a level of awareness, knowledge, and then accountability for your department, what you're expecting to happen, and the people can hold you responsible to that because they've watched it. They watched the process. It was able to happen in public. It wasn't done behind a closed door. It wasn't done just with the city manager and finance director. It's done with the people, like with the city council who represents the people. And so I think it's a real disservice to them because it obviously is just asking for budget requests of other staff or a city manager. And it's like, well, but the ultimate accountability is to the people. It's the people's government. And so they should have that opportunity to listen and to respond and to just hear the direction that things are going and then hold them accountable the following year. I think one of the dangers that happens with elected officials, especially on the city and county levels, like the local levels, I think that there is sometimes this danger of talking about what you know and not what you don't know. And when we take the approach of we're going to speak on something as though we know it, as opposed to, hey, I don't understand that. And wait, what do you mean by that? I think that's like it happens. I think we all do it. I've done it, but it is a real detriment to the process and to the people to not talk about the things that you don't understand. Because if I'm not understanding them clearly, then the public's not going to understand them clearly. And if nobody asks those questions, then you're left with no clarity whatsoever, and trust is not built in that process. Process builds trust when you allow people to go through the process. And so I just think it's very unfortunate that that's not what's happened. And it's very unfortunate that through this whole budget process, there just wasn't questions. We got the budget 7 days before we voted on it. It was like a Tuesday night we got it, and we had to vote by Tuesday. That's it, 7 days with a 300-page binder of all these budgets with the first time we've seen actuals in a year and a half. That's it. We had 7 days to review that, to go through that. I had, to check numbers and to just see, what they're proposing, And in the budget meeting, when that budget it was to the council, the rest of the 4 asked not a single question about it. Not one question. And when I started to ask questions, I was gavelled down and they called for a vote. So they stopped me from asking questions. And I think that is incredibly dangerous and short-sighted because that hurts all of our credibility in the long run on a council, because we're not there to prove what we know or to defend something. We're there to communicate to the public to be their advocates. And I guarantee you they have questions. I guarantee you they want to understand. Well, why aren't you giving the reports? Well, what do the actuals say? Well, what does that budget say? Well, how much more is being spent? How much is being cut? Why are the numbers not adding up on the front page? Like just a lot of very simple things. How come you cut 13 cops, but the budget personnel cost stays the same? Like, and maybe there's a good answer for all of those, but certainly, if I have that question, the public is gonna wanna know that answer, and if I'm gonna tell them, "No, this budget is sound," I have to tell them why, and when I have tons of concerns and you don't allow that process to happen, but instead we say, "Oh, but I know that this is right, and I know that this will be okay, and I know that, the budget is good." It's like nobody's concerned about the things you already know. What the public wants to know is, "What don't you know?" And enlighten us because we probably don't know it either. And that is our role. And I have to remind myself of that um, because the danger is when you're up there to feel like you have some bearing on what's happening. You're like on top of a bull. It's like, I got this. It's totally okay as you're being bucked all over the place. But it's like, no, I got this. But it's like, it's okay. There has to be a measure of humility as an elected official to say what you don't know, because that actually really does benefit the public because they don't know either. And they think that there's special information, and there isn't. The information that they have is the information that I have. Now, I may have some more history. I may be a little bit closer. I may know more things and connect them in a way that they're not connecting them. But it is my job to communicate for them and to ask the questions that they would want to know in that process. And that just didn't happen this year.